Is Anthony Davidson, the BAR test driver who's won himself a seat in the Minardi in place of Alex Young, at least for a couple of races. Let's have a chat with him then. He's with Bruce.
Anthony Davidson, the newest face as a Formula 1 racing driver, but of course you've been testing all year for BAR, but here we are, poised to go out for the first time with Minardi.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to going out. I've been in these paddocks all year, so nothing's really new to me at the moment, but just the whole schedule of how things run is different, and that's what I've got to get used to.
Now, your experience of Hungaroring, does that consist of one lap on foot last night?
That's right, yeah. I mean, I've done loads of laps on PlayStation, but when I walked it yesterday, it looks nothing like it.
How did it differ from your point of view? Is it less steep? It seemed it to me.
It seems very steep when you walk around, yeah. A lot of undulation going on, and it looks like a good track, but it doesn't stop.
Best of luck. Leave you to concentrate. Thanks, Anthony.
Looks like he should be doing a paper round, doesn't he? It's ridiculous. Never mind, they say it's tight, twisty, and there aren't too many overtaking opportunities, but the Hungaroring will test even the best. And talking of the best, time to join John Watson and Ben Edwards and Wetson in the commentary box. Good break then, Ben?
Thank you very much. Yes, Matt. I don't know quite where we got Wetson from, but never mind. We're back together again, John.
Certainly are. I think he's talking about the weather that's potentially on its way to Hungary. Anyway, slip of the tongue, Matt, and spin off and all that stuff. Anyway.
Well, we're getting all set for the start of free practice. Hello, welcome everybody. After the bit of a gap, we're certainly looking forward to some more great action this weekend. Good to hear from Anthony Davidson just there, as we've been talking about. It's going to be a big test for him this weekend to see how he gets on. Up front, of course, well, much the same as ever. We're expecting Michael Schumacher to be the star. John, he always goes well around this track. He's had something like 5 pole positions in the last 8 races here. And
it's going to be very difficult to see anybody seriously challenging Ferrari, I think, here this weekend. It's a familiar story, and one wonders what the rest of the paddock has got to do to get on terms with Ferrari. It'll also, of course, come down to tyres, but we're learning that the tyre choice that Michelin have made prior to coming to Hungary is a slightly harder tyre, and we don't know what Bridgestone have done, so we don't know yet. Until cars get on track, we get a feel for where cars are. It'll probably be the usual suspects in the top 10, but you never know. If it goes one way with one tyre company or the other, we could find Sauber's, here we see Jordan on screen, Takuma Sato, or goodness knows whoever, even BAR, Jacques Villeneuve very much in the news as well.
Well, here we go then. First car on track is indeed Takuma Sato, the man we were hearing from earlier on in the programme, and let's see how he gets on this week. He certainly did a good job on that revised Hockenheim circuit last time out, and looked more composed coming through to take an 8th place finish. Also coming out on track straight away is Anthony Davidson, so that's great to see him out right at the beginning of this session. But what to watch out for, John, here, the characteristic dust and dirt. Now, they've spent a lot of time with the sweeping machines out on the track already over the last couple of days, but no matter how much you sweep this track, it's always dusty and dirty initially.
It certainly is, and of course with the prospect of rain, as we listen to Anthony Davidson just getting the first communications to the Minardi team. He's also having, of course, to learn this circuit. No doubt has spent time on Thursday riding around it in a bicycle, on scooters, as drivers do. And just going through the various checks, but the most important thing with a circuit like the Hungaroring is not to make an error very early in the session and then lose the rest of the session. It is a circuit, as Ben, as you mentioned, that traditionally is always very dirty, but one of the advantages of the rain that's been falling in Central Europe over the last few days is that it's damped down a lot of the what would now be very hard sides to the circuit. You can see the grass, that's never normally as lush as that. Normally it's burned almost straw colour, so much more lush around the circuit than we've seen, and hopefully that will keep down a lot of the dust that gets generated by the members of the public who come into the circuit by cars driving over unmade roads. So whatever may be a circuit that's always traditionally very dirty, it may actually benefit from the rain that's been falling.
Good point, and in fact let's just listen to Anthony as he comes in.
Thank you.
They've actually laid a bit more tarmac down on some of those dirt roads you were talking about, that the spectators have to drive down. They've actually tarmacked some of those areas now, and some of the car parks as well. So again, a little less dust being kicked around, so maybe the track not quite as dirty as we have seen. There is Anthony Davidson's boss for the next 2 races, Paul Stoddart. Remember, he is still contracted to BAR. He is their test driver, has done a great deal of mileage for the BAR team this year, but he's been released for these 2 Grand Prix, so his boss just for the next 2 races is Paul Stoddart, and he'll be hoping for some good progress.
Oh, and Pablo Montoya just finding his way around the track. But going back to Anthony Davidson, of course, this is not a freebie drive. This is a drive that has to be funded, and Anthony Davidson's manager has contributed, I think, a substantial part, has found finance, but also the British Racing Drivers Club has also made a contribution to ensuring that the young Brit gets an opportunity to drive in these 2 Grand Prix. So it's a bit of a cooperative that's seen Anthony Davidson in the Minardi. Let's hope that that effort really gets dividends, and we see Anthony Davidson doing a superb job in these 2 races here in Hungaroring, and then in 2 weeks' time in Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium.
Well, cars making their installation laps, just getting a chance to check that everything's okay, and coming straight back in. There's David Coulthard doing such. And in the meantime, we've got a chance to hear from 1 or 2 of the drivers. Bruce Jones called up a moment ago with Jarno Trulli.
Jarno Trulli, an extra week between the last Grand Prix and this. Are you rested?
Yes, I rested. I had some fun. I did some sport and spent some time with my family.
Now, coming here to the Hungaroring, is this a circuit on which you think Renault will have a possibility of scoring some points? Is it one that might be more suited to the car and, of course, the tyres?
We think so, as the circuit is a slow-speed circuit where you need a lot of traction, and this car has been always very good in this area and very good in changing of direction. And you know, the way the car is built should suit this circuit. Well, best of luck. Thanks, Johnny.
So let's see if Trulli has a slightly better time this time. Here is his teammate, Jenson Button. And Jenson finishing off this season for the Renault team before he makes the move over to BAR Honda. Last time out, didn't get the finish in Germany. More mechanical problems intervened, so he's still down in 7th place in the championship. But he'll be interested to see how Anthony Davidson gets on. The 2 of them competed in karts against each other in their early careers. But there's a man who's certainly done enough karting in his career, still does it whenever he gets the opportunity, and the off time might well have been spending a bit of time doing some karting, I would think, over the last 3 weeks. He just can't keep out of a racing car. He was saying he gets withdrawal symptoms. He hates it, hates not being in the car.
Fully understandable. I mean, when you've done a job like Michael Schumacher or anybody really in the pit lane, you think, great, I've got a holiday break, I can do so many things I've wanted to do. But after about 3 days after the last Grand Prix, of course, Germany, you're wondering, well, what am I going to do? There was no testing. All you can do is play with your toys. Well, that doesn't last very long. The novelty value of that is pretty short. And you want to get back into a racing car. Well, the racing cars aren't available. The next best thing is a kart. And, you know, Michael Schumacher loves playing with karts, loves driving karts, and pretty useful in terms of being a kart competitor, even though he's probably a bit chunky by the standards of some of the youngsters around today.
Yeah, although...
Hello, Jack, can you hear me? Testing.
Stop clear, talking to Jacques Villeneuve, getting all the systems working. And Villeneuve, as we've already mentioned today, very much in the news as to whether he's going to head off to the champ car scene in the United States for a year next year. And we'll have to see whether he decides to go that route for plenty of money, I'm sure, and rejoin his friends in the United States. Ready to come back out or onto track this morning. Twice winner of this Hungarian Grand Prix when he was driving for the Williams team. Back-to-back victories in 1996 and 1997. And in fact, it's been a track that's always been very, very successful for the Williams team. They've had some 7 wins. McLaren second best at Hungary over the years. And Peter, I think you're down by the McLaren team right now, aren't you?
I am indeed, Ben, yes. Just watching DC and Kimi after their installation runs. I don't know if you can see, but right at the back of the DC David Coulthard garage, there's a chap there with glasses. That's Patrick Lowe, ex-Williams electronics engineer. Very rarely appears at races, and I would think that he's a TC man, traction control, and the fact that he's here, I think, just underlines how important traction and acceleration is at this circuit. But at McLaren, you would think that most of the teams would have done a lot of work on their cars in this 3-week break that they've had, but in fact they've used it as a break. There's been no testing, of course, for about 5 weeks now, and at the factories, the race team have been given a good week off in most occasions down the pit lane. So no real change to any of the cars, or particularly not the McLarens. They're coming off, you'll recall, a relatively bad race at Hockenheim, and in retrospect, chatting to the boys here, they think they should have run scrub tyres, and they possibly could have gone for the softer of the 2 Michelins. They ran the hard tyre, of course, and that's why they were so far behind the Williams BMWs in Germany. But as we say at the moment, not looking brilliant, because as John has just said, the Michelin tyre here relatively hard. So interesting to see what happens. One big change at McLaren, starting work very soon. John Sutton, the ex-Williams, ex-Ferrari transmission engineer, the man supposedly responsible for that brilliant gearbox on the Ferrari, where they have virtually no drop-off in revs between 5th and 6th gear. An idea pioneered, I think, by the Wiseman family. But John Sutton joining McLaren at the start of next month, working on a new transmission for McLaren for next year.
All right, so personnel changes up and down the pit lane, and those are crucial changes as we go into next season, as everyone else tries to catch up to the Ferrari bandwagon. Well, the Ferrari supporters always find a way to get a good vantage point around this track, and they start young here in Hungary, supporting Michael Schumacher and, of course, Rubens Barrichello, but it's Schumi who's the man for most of the Ferrari fans here this weekend. Giancarlo Fisichella ready to come out. We have got complete peace and quiet on track at the moment. All 20 cars, as it is this weekend, I'm afraid, without arrows, are all sitting in the pit lane, but it does look as though a number of them, including Fisichella, ready to come back out again.
Indeed, in fact, only 18 cars have been out on track. The two Ferraris, as we've seen Michael fiddling around in the cockpit and shaking hands with the team members, they've yet to come out on track, and it's fairly much the tradition here in Hungary that the teams that are the most competitive tend to be the last to come out. They really want the teams further down the ladder who need to get more mileage to go out, clean up the track, and really also, of course, not waste tyres. And with only the 3 sets available today out of the 10 over the weekend, of course 7 once we start on Saturday, then it becomes a conservation issue. So Giancarlo Fisichella,
yeah, we'll pull him back
out on track. Anthony Davidson also, as Takuma Sato comes through this. All these corners, fairly constant radius corners. There's nothing particularly demanding about the circuit. It's just it's hard to get the rhythm, hard to get the flow. Now, one of the problems I anticipate over the weekend is a huge build-up of rubber just offline, and that's something that will be beginning. Of course, it'll become very much worse once the Grand Prix itself starts. 77 laps around this 2.470 mile circuit. It's quite a long Grand Prix in terms of time, 1 hour 41 minutes last year. With the weather being as it is right now, it'll be a little bit more comfortable, because the traditional high ambient and track temperatures we haven't seen or enjoyed to some degree over previous years aren't likely to be so uncomfortable this weekend. Nevertheless, it's a track that is easy to make a driving error on, and the penalty usually is you spin off and you lose the remainder of that session. And just looking at some of the camera angles, they were just getting an idea that there's still spots of rain falling, and it's quite conceivable that either in this or the following session that we could see rain start to fall. And for Anthony Davidson in particular, he really wants a nice dry Friday to get to grips with the Minardi, the Michelin tyre package, to learn the circuit, to be able to then go forward on Saturday morning and start to do some really good work, and then into qualifying, and hopefully to make both Minardis race starters in Sunday's Grand Prix.
Well, it's ironic, isn't it, that we've got the two former British F3 teammates. They raced for Carlin Motorsport last year, Takuma Sato and Anthony Davidson, and they're the only two drivers on track at the moment. Sato went on to win the British Formula 3 title last year, but don't forget that Davidson came in with less experience. It was his first season of Formula 3, having raced in Formula 4 the previous year, so he did a great job last season. Couldn't quite stay with Takuma Sato within the team with Sato's extra experience.
Well, Sato, he's actually on his 4th lap, so pushing now a little bit harder, and what he's trying to do is what we've seen him do pretty much at every circuit, with the exception, I think, of Silverstone, where he has, of course, got experience. He's trying to find out very quickly the rhythm of the circuit, but in this process it is so easy to make a small error in some of those corners around the back turns 6, 7 and 8, which are flowing rights and lefts. If you get the sequence wrong, you lift off, you're going too quick, and all of a sudden you'll find yourself going backwards. So you have to push as hard as you can, but you've got to bear in mind that this circuit can be very unforgiving.
Now, we're talking a great deal about Anthony Davidson here, John, but I would like to, as I'm sure a lot of motorsport fans would, just extend a thought to another British driver who very nearly was driving this car, and that, of course, Justin Wilson, the reigning Formula 3000 champion. Brilliant driver, great talent. Unfortunately, they tried to fit him into the car, get a seat fitting organised, They just couldn't manage it. They couldn't fit his 6'3" frame into that Minardi so that he could race this weekend.
I mean, it's a great shame because Justin Wilson, the winner of last year's Formula 3000 European Championship, has been denied, I think, both at Jordan and then now at Minardi, just simply based on his height. He's got the ability, he's got the talent, he's got the future, the potential, but just Formula 1 cars, in spite of the regulations being structured to enable tall drivers to be fitted in, he's just dimensionally too big. And it is a great shame for a driver who's got the potential to be denied it, because most team designers want to design cars around Anthony Davidson's rather than Justin Wilson's.
Yes, Davidson is more typical of most racing drivers in stature. He's quite short, quite slight, and of course that's ideal in the cockpit of a racing car. Nowadays the car is weighed with the driver, so weight doesn't really come into it, but certainly in terms of dimensions it's easier. And Davidson here just getting his experience. Good opportunity for us to ride on board with Davidson as he learns the track and shows his car control.
Yes, but also in turn 14 there is that nasty bump. We've seen it every year. So Anthony Davidson discovered, and he got a little bit of opposite lock as he turned into turn 1 again. The corner is, you can't see the corner as you come along the pit straight, the track then just drops away from you, and you have to anticipate your braking zones and anticipate the turning points.
So that is the Minardi team keeping an eye on things. This is a replay of Anthony Davidson, who got a bit out of shape there, just coming around the top corner. But I believe we have the opportunity to speak to Craig Pollock. Craig, I hope you can hear us okay.
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us this morning. A lot of stories in the press at the moment. Stories about Jack possibly going over to the United States for next year. Can you tell us any more about that at the moment? When a decision is going to be made finally as to Jacques' plans for next year?
Well, in reality, there's no offer made than basically a concept. The concept is there, but there's been no offer made, so we wait for an offer. It's not up to us to actually seek that offer, because we're actually very happy where we are.
Craig, good morning, it's John speaking. We have talked about Jacques, but what about you? Your name's been inked into a few deals for the future, one of which is the Arrows team. What's the situation presently?
Well, John, the situation is actually quite clear. Tom has been negotiating with 3 parties, and he has announced that one of the parties was a group of investors that I did put together, and we have been in discussions for a long time. And in reality, today there's still no agreement and no signature on any form of agreement. So until anything actually does happen agreement-wise with a signature on it, I don't really want to say too much.
Bearing in mind the team are giving a dispensation, but if they don't turn up in Spa, does that mean the whole lot is over and out?
Well, I think it's relatively unclear. Apparently the situation is a force majeure, but I always believe that a force majeure is when trucks burnt down or there was flooding or something along these lines, but I have to speak to Bernie, and I'll do that today and see exactly where that is and where it lies.
So could we expect to see you in the pit lane next year as a team principal once again?
Only if an agreement's signed. At the moment there's no agreement, so I'll keep my fingers crossed and let's just wait and see, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig, for joining us. It sounds like you've got a busy time at the moment. Now, on track, we've just seen Olivier Panis, his engine or gearbox or something has expired. He's coasting round. I don't know if we can get to hear anything.
10-4.
He's coasting his way back in, and obviously mechanical problems afflicting Panis straight away.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, inevitable and unbelievable. Olivier Panis.
Okay, Cadotis fan, what are you saying? Do you think maybe the upper level is too much? Because actually causing a misfire as well?
Yeah, I think so. So we will take 1 liter of oil, 1 liter of oil.
10-4.
Well, there we are.
Okay, Olivier, we're just going to remove a bit of oil and take you again.
Little puff of smoke. That's really what identified it.
Yeah, it seems that there's been an overfill of the oil tank, and that's then been pumped into other parts of the engine and is causing a misfire. So it's a bit of, basically, I would call it finger trouble. Somebody hasn't done the job properly, or two people have done the same job, not realising somebody else has done it. So it's back to Jacques Villeneuve, the man who currently may or may not be returning to the US to compete in the kart series. And Jacques, with a contract which stipulates that he's got to drive in this team next year for zillions of pounds and even bigger zillions of dollars. But the feeling is that not necessarily the most popular guy within the team. And I just wonder whether Jacques sometimes should take on board other people's feelings in terms of his position in the team and what he and Craig Pollock have managed to achieve for each other. And really the future of BAR and what they would look to do now that Honda appears to be going to be an exclusive engine supplier to the team in the future.
Well, there is his teammate Olivier Panis. The work now going on around that car to try and determine what the problem was and get him sorted out and back on track as quickly as possible. 5 cars on track at the moment. Fastest so far is Takuma Sato in the Honda-powered Jordan. Jacques Villeneuve with the second fastest time. Ralf Schumacher on track. We've got lots of little add-on wings, of course, here this weekend. It is a track that demands the most downforce that you can get out of a Formula 1 car. Pile on extra bits of wing, as much wing as you can. They're limited, of course, in the amount of wing they can run on the cars nowadays. So they're pretty much all at maximum downforce, particularly here in Hungary.
Yeah, I mean, it very much a similar aerodynamic setup to that would be used in Monte Carlo. And in terms of the suspension, probably not a huge amount different, as Ralph gets it completely wrong into turn 2, and that is a major off. He just locked up the left front and just went straight on, and I mean, pretty fundamental, one might have to say, but it may be an indication to how much grip or how little grip, one might think, that the circuit currently is providing for drivers. And Juan Pablo Montoya, well, he's just having a little laugh about his own teammate. So Ralph continues on, but there you see that right front a bit mucky and dirty from driving onto the grass. The grass actually here is quite damp and squelchy. So there he goes. Well, look at the understeer, and then he just locks up that inside wheel, and off he goes onto what might be considered the slightly dirtier part of the track, because there's still no line as yet on the 2.470 mile circuit.
That was Montoya's reaction as he saw the pictures coming through on the monitors, and he now prepares to climb aboard his own Williams BMW. Let's see whether he's going to be challenging once again for pole position perhaps, and indeed the race. Ralph was really the stronger of the two in the last Grand Prix at Hockenheim, where he really pressurised his brother, had an opportunity, just lost out a bit in traffic perhaps, and of course had a problem at the end with the pneumatic air valve system in the engine being needed to be topped up, and therefore Montoya was gifted the second position. Panis looks as though he's set to come back out on track, and still only a few cars out there, although Felipe Massa and Nick Heidfeld, both Saubers, are on track currently. We spoke to Eddie Irvine earlier before the session began, and Bruce Jones caught up just a little while ago with the man who manages the team on a day-to-day basis, Günther Steiner.
Günther Steiner, 3-week break, new haircut. Has Jaguar Racing got a new car, a car that's going to be really suitable for the Hungaroring?
Hopefully. The haircut is suitable because it's warm here.
Really?
Yeah, it's warm enough for this haircut.
Now looking at the pit lane, obviously there's a gap where Arrows normally is. Is that going to make your pit stops a lot easier because you don't have to swerve around their cars when you're coming in and going out?
I think you don't have to swerve around because there was a few more empty garages, so I think we don't have an advantage. It would be the same.
All right, anyhow, we'll see how you get on. Thanks, Günther.
Thank you.
So there we are, Günther Steiner chatting with Bruce Jones. We're on board with Ralf Schumacher at the moment, but Peter Windsor's had an opportunity to catch up with Eddie Jordan.
Well, I'm actually at the top of the splendid Jordan motorhome. Firstly, I just want to show you how good the view is here at the Hungaroring, and guys like Eddie, of course, being stuck in the pit lane, will take the advantage to come here and have a look at your cars actually in action, Eddie.
Well, it is fairly sensational. It's one of the circuits, and one of the benefits of the race here in Hungary, that you feel so close to the action. You can hear this horrific noise behind us, which of course is music to most of our ears, but it is actually nice to get right close to the situation here.
So how are you going for the music in your ears next year? What sort of engine are you going to have in the back of your cars?
Thought you might ask that. Usually it's old Watty getting involved in some strange concoction of engine chassis manufacture. I thought you were going to leave all that to him.
Well, I will in that case. Watty can come in a bit later. You got some interesting plans this weekend. I gather you're performing in the central square of Budapest. Is that right?
Well, I'm told there's going to be 60, 70,000 people there, but it can only be because it's free. And we brought over people like Roger Taylor from Queen, and we boosted up the band in quite a way, a little bit of rehearsal during the week. It is for charity. It's for the people of Budapest. They're having a little bit of a difficult time here with floods all the way through the Danube. And it's our way, if you like, of saying, look, Formula One, we're here, you've supported us in the past, we're behind you, and we want to do something special. It's also a very good charitable situation. Our own charity, Click, derived quite a lot of revenue out of this gig tonight, so let's hope the cars and the rock concert go well.
Eddie, what's your take on the Arrows situation now and the involvement of investment banks, if you like, in Formula One?
Well, I haven't really studied everything in minute detail, but first I must say I am particularly sorry Tom's not here. Tom and I have been through very good and difficult times over 20-something years, and he is a real tough fighter, and I'm surprised he's not here. So it must be something extraordinarily difficult that prohibits him from being here. Having said that, I think it's probably over a long period of time to criticise either a merchant banker or a venture capitalist or whatever. They're really only in business to prop up and put money in place so as they can derive a return from it. So I'm not sure that that is the cause of the problem. I think there's probably much more deep-rooted in that, but I am quite sure that Tom will resolve it because he is a resilient, hard fighter. I'm not sure there's any better fighter in Formula One than him, and I'd be surprised if Arrows don't come back to life. Lazarus, call it what you like, he will come again.
We all know that the only returns you get from Formula One go to the team principals, not to the minority shareholders.
I keep telling you that, John Watson, he has destroyed all your brains. He's the one who purports to say all these things. We are poor paupers off the streets in Dublin, for heaven's sake. Look at us.
Taku's gone off. No, only joking. Okay, back to you guys.
Thanks very much, Peter. Well, Taku actually hasn't gone off at the moment. He's fifth fastest currently. Ralf Schumacher currently is our top man, ahead of Mika Salo, who's jumped up there in the Toyota. Nick Heidfeld third fastest for Sauber. Then it's Panis, despite his problems earlier on, and a number of cars on track, and that includes Michael Schumacher's come out on track to play, although Barrichello still hasn't even done an installation lap.
No, the Ferrari is just out. Michael Schumacher, but just interesting listening to Eddie once again. And I mean, no wonder the Irish are great recognised as maybe some of the finest literary, what's the word, I can't think of it.
Figures.
I'm still Irish and I can't think of the word and I'm telling them. No, and it's Eddie's in a situation, as Tom is, in a different way. He's also got one of these venture capitalist merchant banks. Warburg Pincus are a 49% shareholder in Jordan Grand Prix, and what it does is it brings capital into a team, but then of course it also means that you've got a substantial partner, and they've also got to have their say in what happens in the team. And right now for Eddie, he is having to look around and find an alternative engine for next year, and the engine that most people are talking about is the Cosworth engine. Eddie, of course, trying to get it branded Ford, trying to put together a deal to get Ford to pay for it. Eddie does not want to have to pay for it out of his own pocket or out of his team's pocket, and it is a tough situation, and one that it's not just affecting right now the Arrows team, a number of teams in a similar situation. It's just a period in Formula One where the small one-man band are finding it very tough to compete against the might of the multinational corporations.
Let's see what Montoya's up to here. Michael Schumacher's on his first flying lap as well, so we'll keep an eye on that. A little bit of moisture still around, as you can see from that camera lens. And this is Montoya coming up to the last corner on the lap. And this isn't going to be a particularly rapid lap, as you can see. Ralf Schumacher's pace, a 119.1 so far, 122.4 from Montoya. That puts him 10th fastest.
Well, Michael Schumacher is coming up to complete his lap. This will be his first flying lap. Here it comes, and you see the understeer as he comes through turn 14. Nevertheless, it might be quick enough to eclipse that of his brother. It is by 0.3 of a second. Michael Schumacher's first flying lap, and he goes out and goes quicker than brother Ralph, who has done in fact 8 laps and is on his 9th lap.
He is remarkable here in Hungary. Oh, gets a bit sideways. That was the corner that Ralph went off at a little earlier on, but Michael had oversteer, the back end of the car wanting to come round on him. He sorted it out and carried on, and now he's heading up the hill once again. It's more hilly than it looks, this place. There's certainly quite a lot of ups and downs to deal with. But as I say, Michael really seems to relish lapping around this 2.5 mile track. Last year, he took pole position by 0.8 of a second from David Coulthard, and in recent years Michael's taken quite a few pole positions here, and often when he's done it he hasn't needed to use all 4 sets of tyres. He's put in a very quick lap early on and basically sat back and waited for anyone else to beat him. He seems to relish this place despite the fact he doesn't have very many fast corners.
No, but he's got such a good car, and the way that the Ferrari approach to giving the drivers what they want, and had a chance to catch up with Ross Brawn during this 3-week break and asked him about some of the comments and some of the things that have been written. Adrian Newey, for example, saying that really Formula 1 cars are fundamentally unstable, and if you can't drive it, it's your problem, not the engineer's problem. And Ross Brawn and Ferrari have gone the opposite way. They've said to the drivers, what is it that it stops you from going quicker? And it's always the back end of the car. So they've given their 2 drivers a stable back end, and that's where the performance has come. And it's, it's quite simple. And on a circuit like this, like any racetrack, it is about confidence. It's the ability to really throw the car around, as we say Giancarlo Fisichella do, with that very quick right-left. So if you haven't got the confidence, you're not going to go quick.
Let's ride with Giancarlo as he comes through that top bend, and this brings him round onto the starting grid over the line. And in qualifying, of course, it will be crucial to try and be at the top end. Overtaking is very, very difficult here. It's almost as bad as trying to overtake at Monaco, so it's crucial to get a decent qualifying position in that 1 hour session.
So we're going to try and aim for something like 7:35 if we can. At the moment we're about 10:40 odd. Okay.
Sato working with the Jordan team, but meanwhile at McLaren, Bruce Jones has managed to catch up with Dave Ryan.
David Ryan, not a lot of activity yet from the McLaren garage. David's getting back in the car to go out. Kimi seems to be a bit more delayed. What's the problem?
They discovered a leaking caliper on Kimi's car on installation lap. It should be just about ready now, so he'll be out, I'd say, in the next 5 or 10 minutes. David, we're just waiting for the track to clean up a bit. So everything going according to schedule, time-wise, not obviously taking into account the caliper.
Okay, we'll leave you to it. Thank you, David.
So there is the work that's going on for Kimi Räikkönen as they prepare to get him back out on track once again. Only the 1 installation lap completed so far by him, but watch for his progress this weekend. Raced here last year for the Sauber team, of course, and had a pretty effective outing just outside the points. Finished in 7th place behind his teammate Nick Heidfeld. His teammate David Coulthard coming out. He's had a run of 4 podium finishes here in Hungary, but he's yet to win the Hungarian Grand Prix.
Well, McLaren certainly looking forward to this weekend's Grand Prix. They feel that it's going to give them another opportunity, as they enjoyed in Monaco, and David Coulthard did the superb job in qualifying and then, of course, won the Grand Prix. And while Giancarlo Fisichella just pushed too hard and slid off the track, he was putting up personal bests in 1st and 2nd sector, so it was an improving lap. We go back to Michael Schumacher, who is going to go even faster than his 1:19.2. He's had purples in 1st and 2nd sector, 17.554. Bear in mind that pole position last year was 1:14.059, and Michael on his 6th lap on Friday morning, well, some 3.5 seconds away from that. As we look again at Giancarlo Fisichella, this is going to be a replay of that little there. The back end goes away. You see what happens, instability in the back of the car. He had to straighten the wheels up, goes off track. But look again, you can see just how little dust around the track there is as we go back to the debutant, and out for really the 2nd time this morning. Traction control cuts in. That's out of turn 13. Watch the bump into 14. That can unsettle a car big time. It's a good exit, good drive off turn 14. Anthony Davidson currently in 16th place and improves to a 1:23.981.
His teammate Mark Webber is on track as well at the moment, just putting together really his first sequence of laps. Not an easy track to get to grips with straight away. I remember looking back to last year, this was the same event that, of course, Jean Alesi switched from Prost to Jordan and Frentzen went the other way. And Alesi actually struggled to match Trulli in qualifying, saying that with this track, it's quite tough to get into an unfamiliar car and be on it straight away, because you've got to chuck the car around a bit here, and you've got to know how it's going to react when you do that.
Yes, it is very much as I described, I think, as a go-kart track. You've got to be able to turn the car, but know that the back end, I keep referring to the rear of the car, how important it is in a circuit like this. and if you can't get the car attitude, then you will pick up a lot and lots of understeer. That in turn will set you down a path of probably getting completely lost technically. So someone like David Coulthard, who tends to like rear end stability, can't deal with a front end car, which is what Kimi Raikkonen is better at doing. David needs that back end to be with him to feel comfortable, then he can drive the car quickly.
Yes, indeed. Well, we've seen it so far this year, most notably at Monaco, of course, where he took victory. And as you say, John, this track about as close to Monaco as McLaren are going to get in terms of similar car setup and perhaps potential for a decent result, coming off the back of that rather disappointing German Grand Prix, where David finished 5th, but lapped by race winner Michael Schumacher.
Of course, the difference here to Monaco is that we don't know where the Michelin tire is going to fall in relation to Bridgestone. At Monte Carlo, it was pretty evident and obvious to most people that Michelin were going to take the softest tire they could to get one of their two prime teams onto that front row or onto pole position. I don't think that's going to be the case here this weekend, and it might prove to be quite a difficult session in qualifying. It may come through in the race, but certainly qualifying might prove to be marginally more difficult than Monte Carlo was.
Don't forget, if you want to ride on board throughout this session or any of the others, Sky button number 6, and you can stay with David Coulthard and listen to that Mercedes engine in all its glory. So Sky button 6 for the onboard view. We're looking at Olivier Panis. They've managed to sort out whatever problems he had with the overfilled oil tank, so that's what it looked like anyway. And he now putting a few laps together as the BAR Honda team try and re-establish themselves. He's 5th fastest, so not a bad effort. Michael Schumacher fastest. Barrichello has gone 2nd fastest now. So both Ferraris topping the times. Fisichella 3rd, Ralph is 4th. Then it's this man, Panis 5th. Felipe Massa 6th. First time here in Hungary. And once again, Massa showing his tremendous ability to learn a circuit very quickly. A 19.7, a good first effort for Felipe Massa, 6th fastest.
Yes, it is. Massa's one of those drivers, just gets out and drives, and well, that's what happens into turn 2. That's the difficult downhill left-hand corner. It's the entry into that corner that has proved problematic. We saw Ralf Schumacher go off track. We saw Michael Schumacher with the back end of the Ferrari stepping out. Now, if a Ferrari has a back end stepping out, you imagine what it must be like for someone like Kimi Raikkonen, who will have a car with certainly the aerodynamic bias very much further forward than teammate David Coulthard. But that's the difference in individual preferences by drivers. Some, and for some reason, I don't know why, starting with Keke Rosberg way back in the early 80s, and then when he joined Williams in 82, would drive the car literally on a dime, didn't worry about what the back end was doing. Felipe Massa, somebody else who has no idea what the rear end does. As long as the front is nailed to the track, he's happy. In contrast, his teammate Nick Heidfeld, more of the traditional style of driver, likes a car that's probably a little bit more comfortable, doesn't like the very nervy, twitchy car that his younger Brazilian teammate seems to be able to cope with.
He likes this track though, Heidfeld. Got a good 6th place here last year and won in the Formula 3000 race back in 1998. So there is a Formula 3000 support race again here this weekend. There's also a round of the Porsche Michelin Super Cup, and we'll be covering that, of course, after the warm-up session on Sunday morning. So more action, not just at Formula 1 cars, but Heidfeld enjoys this track. It might be a difficult one on which to overtake, and it may not feature particularly fast corners, which normally drivers favour, but the technical nature means that quite a few drivers get a kick out of getting a decent lap in here. It's always a challenge.
It certainly is, and it's one of those racetracks. One little error will penalise you very, very severely. Turn 1, nice corner, fairly quick, and whoa, that is wrong, Giano Trulli, what are you doing?
Yeah, that was a bit of a mistake from the experienced Giano Trulli coming in. Of course, that concrete apron in the pit lane having much less grip than the tarmac that they come in on, and it is very dusty as well, but a poor mistake that from Trulli. Shouldn't really be pushing it that hard coming into the pits this early on a race weekend.
Well, the higher speed corners, how's the balance there? Not good at all, especially on turn 3 and turn 11. I turn in and it's good, and then suddenly mid-corner get a lot of understeering.
Well, I have to say, I don't think the balance is pretty good or any good at all in the pit lane either, because it was all over the place and huge understeer, and virtually knocked one of the Renault engineers down trying to get the Renault stopped. Just to go back to the new boy Anthony Davidson, Currently he's 19th of 20. Kimi Räikkönen is just now out for the first time on a flying lap. And the difference between Mark Webber, who's completed 6 laps, and Davidson, who's done 14, is about half a second. So considering Davidson's first time in the car, first time in the circuit, I think that's pretty good effort.
Yes, indeed. Well, let's just ride here with Kimi Räikkönen for a second in the McLaren. Hasn't done many laps yet because of that leaky brake caliper that we were hearing about. Latter part of the lap coming up here. This is a tricky, tight left-hander. Runs up behind the pits. That's part of the area you can see from standing on top of the motorhomes, as Eddie Jordan was doing earlier. And then up into this top corner and watching out for the bumps through there.
Yes, the bump on the entry into turn 14 is what catches people out. And very often you'll find a driver will take a very early entry into the corner. Most drivers tend to hug the corner anyway, rather than making a very clear apex. But that's just for feel and for bite. But that bump can be very aggressive. It depends how the car, the suspension has been set up. As we have once again Takuma Sato discovering the limits of the Hungaroring, and successfully again. I mean, for many drivers that car would have been out of control, going backwards in the gravel. Sato gathers it back up, and I mean, he must have gone through more underbodies than anybody I can think of this year. He's 6th quickest. He had just given us a personal best in that first sector. Well, that lap will have now be put down to experience.
Yes, indeed. I'll have to forget that one for now. And Michael Schumacher, fastest overall. He's about a second off what they achieved on the Friday here last year. But of course, we're still going through the first session. They have 3 sets of tyres to use over the course of a Friday. They'll generally run this first session on 1 set of tyres, and then they'll do a back-to-back comparison between the 2 different compounds. That usually takes place in the second session of free practice this morning.
Yes, it will do, and we'll also then get an idea, I hope anyway, whether Michelin have got a competitive tyre here. We assume that Bridgestone have, since they've gotten much more experience. And also maybe the whole philosophy of Bridgestone right now, they've got one prime team. The Bridgestone tyre is structured around one driver, and that's Michael Schumacher. And even Rubens Barrichello has to learn to live with it. But imagine if you're not a Ferrari team, if you're Jordan, whoa, Kimi Räikkönen on the back end getting away from him. Salvo, Jordan or BAR, you've got tyres which may not suit your car. Well, that's tough, guys. You've just got to make your car work around that tyre.
Well, we've seen tyre battles here in the past, and of course, if you go back to 1997 and that famous nearly win for Arrows and for Damon Hill, a lot of that was down to good performance from Bridgestone on that occasion. Early days for them in Formula 1, but Damon Hill so nearly won this Grand Prix, except for a hydraulic glitch right at the end of the race. Bridgestone's providing a superb tyre that weekend.
I mean, again, of course, those tyres were full slicks. They weren't the groove slicks that we see these days. They came in 1998. But that particular day, for some reason, and whether it was simply down to tyres, whether it was Damon Hill's contribution, whatever, the Arrows came alive. And I mean, literally, the members of the team in those days, Jackie Oliver was a part of that team. In the pit lane, they had almost a tear in their eye. And then it all went wrong. The hydraulics played up, and Damon ended up finishing second to Jacques Villeneuve. But Kimi Räikkönen playing catch-up here and working very hard. And McLaren not really helping him an awful lot, and a racetrack that also is still very, very green and very slippery.
So Sato just settling in there. We gathered that Montoya's been having some problems with the downshift on the Williams, so that's costing him a little bit of track time. And Montoya down in 15th place, only 7 laps completed. Now I believe we have the opportunity to speak to David Richards. Good morning, David.
Good morning.
Great to hear from you, and quite a lot to think about and look at this weekend. Of course, your test driver, Anthony Davidson, having his opportunity to take part in a race weekend for the first time. What are your feelings about Anthony this weekend?
Well, it's quite interesting because there's obviously on the pit wall here, everyone's got an eye on our car as a priority, but there's the odd comment, oh, look what Anthony's done there, we're tracking his times at the same time. No, he's got great support from everybody in the team. Everyone's done a great job with testing with us, and we're all delighted to see him have this opportunity.
Now, you've released him, I gather, for these next 2 Grand Prix. What happens after that?
Well, that's all we were asked to do in the first place, because I think Paul was looking at getting Young back in the car later on, so we'll face that situation when it arises.
Now, is there any more information on the movements of Jacques Villeneuve for next year?
No, you know, as Jacques points out, he has a contract with us to race in Formula 1 for next year. There are other opportunities and other discussions going on at the moment, and I guess those will proceed and continue over this weekend.
David, good morning. It's John. In a world of Formula 1 where industrial espionage, secrecy is such an important part, you have let your test driver drive for your competitors and tyres. How do you sort of rationalise all that, and how do Michelin come to terms with letting a Bridgestone driver drive on their product?
Well, I think, you know, you have to trust people, and you know, our team's built around trust and around an openness of everybody, and I trust Anthony. We had a long talk to him beforehand about his responsibilities to us, to Honda, to Bridgestone, and I have every confidence in it that he'll respect that.
Great, well, thank you for joining us, David, and good luck with this weekend. Let's hope it goes well for you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Now, down in the pits, Michael Schumacher, fastest in this session so far, 17.5, a tenth slower than him, his teammate Rubens Barrichello. Let's ride with the exciting Brazilian Felipe Massa. He has now been pushed down to 8th, but he's on a quite slightly quicker lap. Well, he was in the first sector, but lost it on the middle sector.
Well, he is an entertainer during that two-way traffic with David Richards. We're watching Felipe Massa, and again, this overhead view looking into the cockpit, his hands just a blur. I mean, he works so hard on that steering wheel. But as I mentioned earlier, it's only the front end of the car he's concerned about. He doesn't worry, the back end can be all around him, and he just focuses on the front. It's an amazing way of driving a Grand Prix car. I can't think that it's a particularly productive way of doing it, but certainly it provides entertainment for us and of course for our audiences.
Anthony Davidson's just improved on his time and has gone faster than Webber for the moment. He's completed 19 laps. He's done a good number of laps this morning. I have to say, he's done more than anybody else, and that's really what they need. Reliability, get in the mileage, and it's doing well. Webber's only completed 6 laps so far.
Yes, and I think what's quite interesting is that lap was done on the 19th lap, and I suspect that's still on an original set of tyres. So, yeah, that's a pretty good effort by the Minardi team. And in fact, just looking at our records, they've only had, I think, 1 engine failure through the year as well. So, okay, Minardi may not be at the sharp end of the grid in terms of out-and-out performance, but they're doing a pretty good job by and large, with the exception of that little issue they had with wings back in Spain, in terms of reliability.
Yes, not bad at all. Webber has certainly completed a good many laps this year. On board with Villeneuve. Now, let's watch him up at the top end of the circuit here, or let's just see what happened to Felipe Massa first a moment ago. Well, that's fairly standard over the curve there, not quite as dramatic as some, although he certainly kicked up the dirt there.
Yeah, he threw dirt, so that's not quite as much as you would normally see. It is a bit damper, nevertheless. Felipe Massa's bill with the Sauber team for underbody is probably matching that of Takuma Sato's at Jordan.
Well, you have to be a bit careful. David Coulthard managed to put a hole in his monocoque on Friday last year, so they had to build up a new car for him the next day. The curbs can be a little bit vicious here in Hungary. We're watching Juan Pablo Montoya, had that down change problem suffering earlier. He's down in 15th position currently.
Yes, it's somehow or other, I don't understand Williams. They've got a very, very quick car. They do like to use Friday to do all their race work, but at the same time, I mean, how would you have a downshift problem with all the expertise and knowledge and engineering they've gotten? In the same at McLaren, a fundamental thing like a leaking caliper. How can teams like this, how can they always have that sort of fundamental problem?
Yes, that's right. It seems strange when so much money is being spent, but I guess there's always something to catch you unawares. Up at the top part of the track now, Montoya heading back around, and the car looking pretty stable at the moment. Early days, of course, and probably with quite a lot of fuel on board.
Yes, he's probably running a fairly high level of fuel, probably simulating what they would certainly do, assuming they're going to go for 2 stops, which is what most people, I'm assuming, will do. And it's all about this information gathering. The team like to do it. They accept that the racetrack is not particularly clear or clean, and they just think, well, there's no point in going for out-and-out speed because the track is going to come to them. So let's do our homework and then we can work on the speed of the car.
A little bit of adjustment going on the brake cooling here on the McLaren of Kimi Räikkönen. What they're doing is just putting a little bit of tape over the brake duct, and that's to bring brake temperatures up slightly. These carbon brakes working in an ideal operating zone, very high temperatures. Here in Hungary, of course, we're used to seeing high summer temperatures. It's not quite as blisteringly hot today as they might have expected. So they're just blanking off a little bit of that brake duct.
Yes, of course, if you get an imbalance on brakes, that can chuck you off the track as much as anything else. As Michael Schumacher, he was fastest in first sector. He was quite a bit down on his personal best in second sector, but dragged it back out in that final few corners onto pit straight. So Michael further improves, and again, it's just never ending. It just doesn't stop, does it?
That's quite an advantage. They have 1.4 seconds over their nearest rival. That is from Schumacher's time to Fisichella in third, Barrichello in between. But from the top Ferrari to the next best opposition, it is 1.4 seconds. Fisichella is third for Jordan, however, so that's a bit of a boost for the Jordan team. And Peter's actually caught up with Gary Anderson.
Yes, while Giancarlo and Sato both in the garage at the moment. Quick chance to have a word to Gary. Things looking good for Giancarlo?
Yeah, it started quite well. We've done a few revisions on setup for here because we had a bit of time to think about it. So, yeah, it looks quite reasonable.
Not a lot of work going on the car there. Looked like he was just waiting for the track to get a bit quicker. And that last period of time in the garage looked like you were just waiting for the track to pick up a bit of grip. Not a lot of work going on the car.
No, we just did a slight change to balanced and just waiting, because obviously it gets a lot better here. It gets very dusty and it takes quite a while to clean up.
Looking quite good for Bridgestone at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to see. I mean, obviously the temperature, because of this morning, has not been very high, and that helps the Michelin, so it's going to climb during the weekend, so I think that'll bring it all back to reality.
Okay, thanks very much, Gary.
Thanks, Peter. Well, indeed, it is Bridgestone's 1, 2, 3, 4. Currently, fastest Michelin runner is Ralf Schumacher in 5th place. Panis, 6th fastest, ahead of Heidfeld. Sato up in the top 10. Now, this was Villeneuve a moment ago.
Well, that's the result. The bump on the entry into that turn 14, the final turn on to start, finish straight. And Villeneuve got caught by a big oversteering slide. And then the car runs wide. Of course, nothing you can do, just got to back out of it, gather it all up. And not only would he have lost the time on that lap, he would have lost then the following lap, because there's a momentum off turn 14. Down pit straight would be lost as well. So that penalty is a 2-lap loss.
Yes, so Villeneuve now trying to get himself back into the swing, back into the flow of this track. Panis has moved up to 3rd place now, and there coming through the shot is the Ferrari, and that was Michael Schumacher, I think, was it? Yes, Michael, and he's just gone looked fast. Well, he's just set the fastest mid-sector time there.
Going back to Jacques Villeneuve, gets through turn 14 a lot better this time. Villeneuve currently 10th, his teammate Panis 3rd, and Villeneuve up to 7th. Now, it's not unusual to see Panis do a lot better on Friday than Jacques. Jacques tends to this habit to go down some very strange routes. Yes, you're pointing Michael Schumacher, and there he is. He's just completed a lap and has improved. But what Jacques Villeneuve does is they like to fiddle. He and his engineer sometimes go way off where they should be, and Olivier Panis just gets on with the job and does a good job.
So Michael Schumacher, let's just see the end of the lap, towards the end of the last lap, where he put in a very quick time. This was through turn 13 left-hand, a bit sideways on the apex, but didn't really lose much time from it, did he?
I don't think so. The traction control will be activated fairly severely, but I think by at that point, so not a great deal of loss of time. He did improve overall. He was actually fastest in that 3rd sector on that lap as well. He maybe a half a tenth or a tenth of a second at most.
Fun little track map there at Ferrari, where they can keep an eye on everybody and where they are around the track. Crucial, of course, in terms of qualifying as well, to try and determine when to send your man out to take that pole position if possible. Michael Schumacher has done that on numerous occasions here. Barrichello on track as well now.
Well, off track and back on track, because Rubens got it wrong into that tight right-left chicane, an area where we often see drivers lock up. It's after the exit of that long turn 5, and sometimes just slightly too fast into it. So Rubens getting trapped. He had put a personal best in the 1st sector, but of course that 2nd sector is now going to be compromised, and he really only can do is just come back and start that process all over again. Some 0.4 of a second slower than his teammate. And Felipe Massa way offline. Now, whether that was let Barrichello through or not, I do not know, but it seems suspiciously far offline. Of course, he'll get rubber and whatever muck is offline on his tyres, and give him a further exciting lap.
Let's just watch and listen here for a moment. Coming down to turn 2. Long period off the throttle there, as you can hear. And then they're just changing up a little early. It's flat out through the little kink there, the right-hand kink. up towards a fairly quick left, and now towards a slower right.
And this is turn 5. It's a a real understeer builder. Then in the exit, you just watch the tail that it doesn't snap around. Then into this this is where Rubens got it wrong in the previous lap. This is into that very unpleasant little sort of turns 6 and 7, which you will see as the weekend goes on will catch many a driver out.
But that Ferrari looks wonderful again. Just, you can see from the chassis language, if you like, rather than the body language. It is brilliant the way it rides the curbs, the way he can throw it around, and look at the split time. He's up on Michael Schumacher's time here.
Yes, the Ferrari is really so fluid, I think is the best way to describe all through those sequence of corners, from 7 into 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. And I mean, just the bump, well, the Ferrari is virtually unaffected by it, and he now is fastest. But Michael Schumacher is responding because Michael has gone fastest in first sector, and no doubt will pick up on second and thirds, and Rubens' time, which is only a thousandth of a second quicker, will be once again second quickest time of the day.
So let's see whether this is going to be an improvement. We're getting towards the latter stages of this first session, 6.5 minutes still to go in the session, and Michael on a quick lap here. First sector very rapid. Let's see what the second sector is going to be. Just slightly down on Barrichello.
Well, that'll be a surprise to Michael as it is to us. We thought that first sector time being quickest, we would have seen him quickest in second. Better exit out of turn 13. Watch the Ferrari from on board. Where's the bump? I didn't see the bump. Now, he's not using it that part of track, but nonetheless the Ferrari chassis is just so good, and he's still down. So maybe I was wrong. Rubens' time will remain quickest. And we've just got 6 minutes of this session remaining.
Only 54 thousandths in it though, John. I mean, hardly anything to write home about. Tiny amount of time. But it means that they're...
We'll get back out. All right, let's do the rear camber. Go on.
Change of rear camber.
Six was a little bit better. Secret. Even set up was was more consistent.
So Fisichella still working away. Still, as I say, though, 1.3 seconds off the new fastest time that Barrichello has set. Let's see what Heidfeld can achieve here, also on the Bridgestone tile, though the middle sector he's backed off, so maybe he'll try next time around.
Yes, that was a lap. I think he may have had a go in the first part. He did, in fact, but compromised it somewhere around the lap. So starts that process all over again, going on to his 18th lap on this first 1 hour Friday practice session. You see what they do? They really try to come in quite early into a corner. They don't make a definitive apex. They really hug the curbing in turn 2 as they do in turn 14, pretty much all the way around. That's the way you'll pick up the most bite. That's the way the front tyre will be most efficient. Whereas in other corners you do make a defined apex. So Rubens Barrichello, personal best in sector 1. Sector 2, fractionally off the pace, but well, hardly noticeable.
Interesting watching our onboard pictures here, John, and an opportunity to try and sort of hear where they're able to get onto hard throttle in a couple of those key corners. Like you were saying, turn 14, the last one, we can almost detect differences in the cars by how early the driver can get on the throttle.
Yes, and some drivers are using what we call short shifting. They want to be on the power, but they know if they give it maximum power and say third gear, it may make the car unstable, so they pull fourth gear below maximum power, but allowed them to use full throttle. So it's one of the tricks of a driver that helps a car when they still really are waiting for the track to offer up maximum levels of grip.
So Bridgestone runners now in the top 6 places in this first free practice session. Fairly cool, slightly overcast conditions in Hungary. We're about 15 miles away from downtown Budapest. Of course, the famous old city on either bank of the Danube. The Danube, as we've heard, which is certainly higher than normal and is flooding the road that runs right alongside it, but none of the same problems that we've seen in Prague and Dresden, thankfully, although they are a little concerned over the coming days as some of the rains make their way down the Danube and may well make it more of a problem here in Budapest. For the moment, they don't have those problems. Kimi Räikkönen on track, 9th fastest currently, and let's just see, this could be an improvement. Yes, that brings him up quite well to 7th place, so he now becomes the fastest Michelin runner.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting weekend because the temperatures are slightly down on what we normally expect here in Hungary. So maybe the Michelin commitment to their tyre philosophy, their tyre compounds, and certainly the constructions. Well, there's a Jaguar who's been off, Pedro de la Rosa, and that was just an off. So Pedro just letting traffic get through before he picks up the pace again. And it may be that Michelin have just been slightly caught out by the weather in Central Europe. We do know that they're capable of responding exceptionally quickly. They did that about 4 Grand Prix ago, where they're able to go back after a Grand Prix, 3 days between one and the other, and they found that tyre that time.
Here he comes again. He's fastest in the first sector, personal best in the second sector. Michael Schumacher looking to take fastest time away from teammate Rubens Barrichello, and let's just see how quickly he can go. Are we going to be into the 1:16s? Yes, we are. A 1:16.9, only 4 tenths away now from the fastest time that was set on the Friday, and Massa has gone off.
Well, it was inevitable at one point, but here in Hungary the gravel is pretty solid. Well, I was saying that maybe with the rain it's not quite as solid as it usually is. So Felipe Massa with, well, just a minute and a half, well, under 2 minutes remaining. So not really very much lost, other than the fact that he's got to get the car now. There it is into that turn 6 and 7 under brakes, the back end swaps ends. And that's the first time that Felipe's managed to do it as well as we see him doing it right now. He's had the car sideways, he's been off track a few times. He works very hard in the cockpit.
So he's been, I think, or is in the gravel trap anyway. So the car is okay.
22 laps from that set of tyres. I suspect that the rear's probably getting a bit worn. Just trying to look at them as the car is being pulled back. They look to be fairly well worn.
Yes, that's right. Well, as you say, he's not really going to lose much time. Villeneuve has moved up the order to 5th. Let's just run through it quickly. In the closing moments, it might change again. Michael Schumacher ahead of Barrichello. Massa, 3rd fastest, going off, but he's still set a quick time. Fisichella pushed back to 4th by Massa, then Villeneuve 5th, Panis in 6th place. 7th is Heidfeld, and then so fastest Michelin runner is Raikkonen in 8th. Then it's Ralf Schumacher, Jenson Button. And in fact, Jenson Button's only just gone into 10th, so he wasn't showing on that classification, but he's just moved up to 10th. So then it's Sato, De La Rosa, Coulthard, and Trulli 14th, with Mika Salo, the faster of the Toyotas, 15th. And it's Montoya way down in 16th place, ahead of Irvine, Webber, McNish, and Anthony Davidson.
Well, clearly the circuit suiting Bridgestone tyres, as David Coulthard comes up to complete another lap. David 13th quickest. This is his 12th lap of the morning so far. And personal best in the second sector for David Coulthard. Comes across the line, and we see an improvement up to 10th place. Davidson's off, well, yeah. 5 seconds remaining.
Gearbox is just gone. I have a gearbox with drive shaft. I've stopped it going into turn 6.
Well,
I'm watching you on TV.
We go back to Michael Schumacher, fastest in first second, fastest in second sector. So there's the time, just over a 10th of a second up on his previous fastest. So watch Michael Schumacher now as he goes into turn 14. He's working a bit harder now than he was doing in previous laps. Comes across start-finish line, 1:16.755, and a nice way to finish the session.
Well, it's just amazing, isn't it? This Ferrari car, we know how good it is, but proof once again, if required, as the two Ferraris 1 and 2 by over a second, and that includes Barrichello. He's over a second fastest than their nearest opposition in first free practice. Anthony Davidson clambers out of the Minardi. Let's hope that they can get whatever problem it is sorted out in the short break that they now have before the second session. He's done a good job so far. 25 laps he's managed to complete, and that's more, well, it matches in fact Villeneuve has also done 25 laps, but they have both achieved the most laps in this morning's free practice. A little disappointing to end it that way with some sort of mechanical problem, but nonetheless a good effort.
It's a disappointment in a sense, but I have to say it's fortunate it happened on the last lap of this session rather than on the first lap of the next 1 hour session. So maybe looking at it from the positive point of view, you think, yeah, we can get it fixed and get out and do another 25 laps.
Coulthard heading back towards the pits. He has taken the checkered flag. He's 9th fastest, just a couple of spots behind teammate Kimi Raikkonen. But at the moment, it does look as though the Michelin runners are not as quick. But don't panic, because, of course, things will change. This track will clean up considerably over the next couple of days, and it will vastly change what the tyres need to do. There's Anthony Davidson with fellow rookie, although now with a bit more experience, Felipe Massa. And not having much of a discussion at the moment. They're just watching the last few cars finishing off their laps. Davidson no doubt disappointed. This was the moment ago when Ralf Schumacher went off, coming up to turn 6, that notorious chicane.
Yeah, now again, in other levels of grip from Michelin, not very high. You sense you're going to get it, you think you've got it, and then all of a sudden when you put the brakes on, it's not there. And Ralf, now we've seen two pretty basic errors from him, one at the beginning of the session, one at the very end of the session. And Ralf Schumacher down in 10th place. And looking down the list, David Coulthard is in fact still, was Kimi Räikkönen in 7th place, the fastest of the Michelin runners.
So Michael Schumacher can be well happy. After the 3-week gap, he has come back and he's gone fastest again. Remember that he's chasing another record this weekend. It is a significant record, trying to achieve 10 wins in one season. And starting off this way, he's got a good chance of doing it. Like we've seen so many times this year, a lot of Bridgestone runners in the top 10 in the first session. Now that may change in the second session, so we'll have to wait and see. But Sauber running well, BAR and Jordan fairly evenly matched. McLaren top of the Michelin runners, but Ralf Schumacher not far behind. Montoya didn't have a particularly good run this morning, but again he did get some 18 laps completed, and they did have a little bit of work to do on the gearbox at one stage, so he ends up 16th. Jenson Button there in 11th, a couple of places ahead of teammate Jarno Trulli, and there Anthony Davidson at the bottom of that table, but only 9/10 of a second slower than teammate Mark Webber, and separated there by Alan McNish in the Toyota. Mika Salo in 16th place, again ahead of Eddie Irvine. So we're seeing the sort of normal people down at the bottom end. It will depend on how the tyres perform as we go through the rest of the weekend.
Yes, but the main thing is to keep it on track. We've seen this morning in this 1 hour session how easy it is. Experienced drivers getting caught out, and there, well,